The engines of the Lucky Lady thundered like a storm over the blackened sky of Berlin. It was February 1945, the war's dying winter, and the city below was burning in a million orange wounds. The B-17 shook as flak bursts flashed around her, each one a deadly blossom of fire and steel. Inside the cramped fuselage, 10 men sweated and prayed behind their oxygen masks. They'd flown 24 missions before this one. Number 25, the last, should have been their ticket home. Captain Jack Mercer, 40 years old, silver-haired and calm as ever, gripped the controls with a pilot's touch learned from years in civilian skies. Before the war, he'd flown for Pan Am. Now, he flew through hell. "Steady, boys," he said into the intercom, voice rough but steady. "We drop on the mark and go home." But today wasn't a normal run. Tucked behind the bomb bay was someone, a secret passenger. No name, no uniform, only a small leather case chained his wrist. Intelligence, they'd said. Information that could shorten the war. A sudden explosion rocked the plane. Alarm screamed. Smoke filled the cabin. One engine coughed and died, then another. "We're hit," shouted the co-pilot. Mercer's jaw clenched. "Hold her steady. We're not dying over Berlin." Below, the night glowed red. Above, death circled closer. Flak hammered the Lucky Lady like a mad drummer. Shrapnel tore through her belly, slicing oxygen lines and riddling the fuselage with holes the size of fists. The bomber lurched hard to the left. "Engine 3's gone," yelled Lieutenant Harris, the flight engineer. "We're losing altitude fast." Captain Mercer yanked the yoke, fighting the dying bird with every ounce of strength left in his arms. The B-17 groaned, its metal skin screaming under the strain. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw the glow of Berlin fading behind them, but so was their altitude. They were barely 2,000 feet up and dropping. In the nose turret, Sergeant Lucky Dugan, the bombardier who gave the ship her name, coughed through the smoke. "Bombs away, Captain, but that flak's tearing us new ones." He wiped blood from his cheek where a sliver of glass had cut him. Then a calm, cold voice came from behind, the passenger. He had stood up, bracing himself against the swaying floor. "You must keep the aircraft flying, Captain Mercer. Whatever happens, we must not be captured." His accent was British, Oxford clean, but his eyes were tired, secretive. Mercer didn't reply. He had no time for mystery men. "Strap in and pray, mister," he barked. "We're trying to live through this." A moment later, a bright flash filled the cockpit. The right wing caught fire. Flames trailed in the night like a comet. Mercer shouted, "Feather the prop. Get that extinguisher going." But it was too late. The Lucky Lady was dying, burning, twisting, falling out of the war-torn sky toward an uncertain fate. The Lucky Lady was spiraling. Alarms screamed through the cockpit, and the fire on the starboard wing had become a roaring inferno. Smoke filled the crew compartment, choking the men who were still at their stations. The altimeter needle spun downward, 5,000 feet, 4,000. "Bail out! Bail out!" shouted Lieutenant Harris, slamming his hand on the alarm bell. One by one, the crew grabbed their parachutes, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. This was supposed to be the last mission, their ticket home, their parade. Captain Mercer's gloved hands refused to leave the controls. "Not yet," he roared. "We're too low. We'll burn alive before the chutes open." From the tail gunner's position came a desperate voice. "Skipper, the tail's gone. We're breaking apart back here." Then static. Mercer looked over his shoulder. Through the smoke, he saw the passenger, the mysterious Brit, clutching his briefcase like a lifeline. "You have to jump," Mercer shouted. The man shook his head. "No, the information can't fall into enemy hands. We land, no matter where." A moment later, the last engine coughed out. The bomber became silent except for the howl of the wind. Below them stretched a patchwork of dark forest and snow. Sweden, if Mercer's calculations were right. Neutral ground. Safety. "Hold on," he growled, gripping the yoke with both hands. "We're putting her down." The Lucky Lady sliced through the trees, belly first. Metal screamed. Sparks flew. Wings tore off like paper. And then, silence. Only the soft hiss of falling snow. The world was still, except for the crackle of cooling metal and the faint whisper of wind brushing through the pine trees. The lucky lady lay half buried in snow, her fuselage split open like a crushed tin can. Smoke rose in lazy curls from what had once been her proud engines. Captain Jack Mercer blinked through the haze, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. His ears rang. The cockpit glass was shattered, the dashboard dead. "Harris! Dugan!" he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. From somewhere behind, a groan answered. Sergeant Dugan crawled out from under a twisted panel, his face pale, one eye swollen shut. "Still in one piece, Skipper. I think," he muttered. Mercer stumbled to his feet, every muscle screaming. He pushed open the shattered side window, and cold air slapped his face, sharp, clean, real. They'd made it out of Germany. He could taste freedom in that frozen wind. Then he saw him, the British passenger. The man was already standing outside in the snow, coat torn, briefcase still chained to his wrist. He was staring into the dark woods as if expecting someone or something. "Where the hell are we?" Dugan asked, rubbing his arms against the cold. "Sweden," Mercer said, panting. "If we're lucky." The Brit turned slowly. "You're close, Captain," he said quietly, "but not close enough. The Germans won't let this go." Mercer frowned. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes narrowed. "They'll come for me. They already know." From deep within the forest, the faint sound of engines echoed, distant, yet approaching fast. The night was thick with silence, except for that growing sound in the distance. Low, rumbling engines, grinding through snow and pine. Not Swedish, not rescue. German. Captain Mercer's instincts sharpened. "Dugan, get the men together. Check who's still breathing. Move." Dugan limped off toward the wreckage, calling out names, his voice echoing in the cold. Mercer turned to the British passenger, who was calmly brushing snow from his coat, as if none of this surprised him. "You want to start explaining what's going on?" Mercer demanded. The man finally met his gaze. "My name's Edwin Cole, British intelligence. What I carry here," he tapped the chain briefcase, "is the German atomic program. Names, facilities, locations. If it reaches London, the war ends sooner. If they recover it," he let the sentence hang. Mercer's stomach turned cold. "So you're saying those bastards crossing the border aren't just hunting us, they're hunting you?" Cole nodded once. "They won't stop. Even here, the distant engines grew louder now, joined by the sharp barks of dogs. The Germans had already crossed into Swedish territory, a desperate, illegal chase that would be denied by every government if word ever got out. "All right," Mercer said grimly. "Then we disappear before they find us." Dugan returned, breathing hard. "2 dead, 3 wounded but moving. We can't stay here, Skipper. They'll spot the wreck from miles away once daylight hits." Mercer looked east, toward the faint glow of dawn creeping over the trees. "Then we move now. Grab what you can. We're not dying in neutral ground." Behind them, through the smoke and shadows, the first German scout stepped into the clearing. Snow crunched under boots as Captain Mercer led what was left of his crew into the dark forest. The cold bit deep, the kind that clawed through wool and bone alike. Their breath came out in white bursts, drifting away like ghosts. Behind them, the burning wreck of the Lucky Lady cast an orange glow over the snow, a beacon for anyone hunting them. "Keep low," Mercer whispered. "Stay quiet. We're ghosts until sunrise." Cole, the British agent, moved silently beside him, briefcase still chained to his wrist. He never complained about the cold or the pace. "They'll have dogs," he murmured. "Once they pick up our scent, it's only a matter of time." Mercer shot him a look. "Then we better give them a trail they can't follow." He turned to Dugan. "You still got those flares from the survival kit?" Dugan nodded. "Yeah, what?" Mercer smiled grimly. "We're gonna make them think we went the other way." They split briefly, Dugan and 2 men circling south, lighting short bursts of red flare fire to lead the Germans astray, while Mercer and Cole pushed north with the wounded. The plan worked for a while. By dawn, the engines had faded behind them, replaced by the distant barking of dogs, confused and scattered. They bought themselves time. Cole stopped for a moment, breathing hard. "You fly like a hero, Captain. Do you run like one too?" Mercer gave him a tired grin. "You just make sure that briefcase gets home. That's your war now." From somewhere far off, a rifle cracked, one sharp report slicing through the trees. A bullet smacked into the snow just inches from Mercer's boot. The Germans had found them again. The crack of the rifle echoed through the forest like thunder. Mercer dropped to one knee instinctively, snow exploding around him. "Down!" he shouted. The men dove for cover behind a fallen spruce. Another shot tore through the air, splintering bark above Dugan's head. "They're close." Dugan hissed, fumbling for his sidearm. His hand was shaking, half from cold, half from fear. Mercer squinted through the trees. The dawn light filtered in pale and thin, painting long shadows across the forest floor. He saw movement, two figures in white winter gear, ghosts against the snow, moving fast and quiet. German commandos, elite troops. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Cole crouched low, gripping his briefcase. "If they capture me alive, they'll take what's inside before I can destroy it," he said. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed him, sharp with fear. "Not happening," Mercer growled. "We'll hold them off." He looked around. They had maybe 6 men left, 3 wounded, and only a few rifles between them. No radio, no rescue, just a broken crew in the middle of nowhere. Mercer signaled to Dugan. "We flank left. Lay down some noise. Cole, you stay down and keep that case safe." They moved like hunters, slow, deliberate. The snow muffled everything except their breathing. Then a burst of automatic fire ripped through the woods. The air filled with whistling lead and splintering wood. Harris went down first, hit in the leg. "I'm good. Keep moving," he shouted through gritted teeth. Mercer raised his rifle, sighted one of the commandos, and fired. The figure spun, dropped. Silence followed, brief, brittle silence. Then, faintly, they heard the sound of more engines. Trucks. The Germans were coming in force. The forest erupted with sound, engines growling, men shouting in German, dogs barking furiously. The calm dawn shattered into chaos. Mercer didn't hesitate. "Move! Now!" he yelled, hauling Harris up by his collar. The wounded man limped, teeth clenched, blood dripping onto the snow. Cole stumbled beside them, his breath ragged in the freezing air. "How far to the border?" he gasped. Mercer didn't slow down. "We're already in Sweden, but the Germans don't give a damn about borders tonight." Behind them, muzzle flashes blinked like fireflies among the trees. Bullets whistled past, punching into trunks and snowbanks. Dugan turned and fired short bursts to cover their retreat. "They're fanning out," he shouted. 10, maybe 15 of them. Mercer led the group through the thickest part of the forest, where pine boughs drooped heavy with snow. Every step was agony, boots sinking, lungs burning, but stopping meant death. The howls of the dogs drew closer, echoing off the frozen hills. Then, through the mist and frost, they saw it, a frozen river, wide and gleaming under the morning sun. Beyond it, dark smoke rising from chimneys, a village. "Safety! Come on," Mercer urged. "That's our shot." They stumbled down the slope, slipping on ice, sliding the last few feet to the riverbank. Mercer tested the surface, solid. "Cross in pairs. Keep your weight spread." Halfway across, the ice groaned. Cracks spiderwebbed under their boots. And then, from the treeline behind them, a German shouted, "Fewer." Gunfire tore across the ice. Bullets ricocheted like angry hornets. The Lucky Lady's crew ran for their lives, across the frozen river, toward the faint promise of a neutral sunrise. The ice thundered beneath their boots, cracking like gunfire. Mercer's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Keep moving," he shouted, waving the others forward. Every step felt like dancing on death. Dugan hauled Harris by the arm, both slipping, nearly falling. Behind them, bullets peppered the ice, each hit echoing with a sharp ping that sent chills through every man's spine. One round zipped past Mercer's ear, so close he felt the air split. Cole stumbled, dropping to one knee. The chain briefcase banged against the ice, leaving a dent. Mercer spun back. "Get up, Cole." "I can't." "Then crawl, damn it," Mercer barked, yanking him by the collar. The ice beneath them moaned, a long, hollow sound that made everyone freeze for half a heartbeat. Then came a deafening crack. The ice gave way. Harris vanished with a shout, swallowed by black water. "Man down!" Dugan screamed, dropping to his knees, reaching. Mercer lunged, catching Harris's hand just as it disappeared under the freezing current. "Hold on," he yelled, teeth gritted, pulling with all his strength. The water was brutal like knives. Harris gasped, skin turning blue, but Mercer and Dugan dragged him out, coughing and half frozen. There was no time to breathe. Another bullet hissed past, and the Germans were nearly at the shore. "Go!" Mercer shouted, pushing them forward. "To the trees. Move!" They scrambled up the far bank, gasping for air. Behind them, a German squad reached the river's edge, but the first man to step on the ice plunged straight through. The rest stopped cold, shouting warnings. Mercer turned back, panting, eyes burning. "Looks like luck ain't done with us yet," he said. For the first time, Cole smiled. "Your plane's name was fitting after all." By midday, the survivors stumbled into the outskirts of a small Swedish village, a quiet cluster of wooden houses nestled among pine-covered hills. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the smell of burning wood filled the air. To men who just crawled out of hell, it was the sweetest scent in the world. Mercer half-carried Harris, whose soaked flight suit had frozen stiff. Dugan walked ahead, rifle in hand, scanning the snowy streets. The villagers, simple folk in wool coats and fur hats, stopped and stared. A few crossed themselves. American uniforms were rare here. A tall man emerged from one of the houses, broad shoulders, gray beard, sharp eyes that spoke of caution. He said something in Swedish Mercer didn't understand. Cole stepped forward, breath steaming. "We're Allied airmen," he said, crash-landed near the border. "We need shelter. Please." The man's gaze lingered on the briefcase, then on their wounds. After a moment, he nodded toward the barn. "Quickly," he said in broken English. "You hide. Germans, they come sometimes." Inside the barn, the men collapsed into hay and exhaustion. The warmth, the smell of livestock, the safety, all of it felt unreal. Harris shivered violently. "If we make it home, I'm buying Sweden a damn medal," he muttered through chattering teeth. Cole crouched near the barn door, eyes scanning the road. "They'll come here," he whispered. "They know we crossed." Mercer looked at him. "Then we'll be ready." Outside, bells tolled from a distant church. Snow began to fall again, soft, endless, and deceptively peaceful. But beyond the trees, across the frozen river, a column of dark figures was already moving toward the village. Snow fell heavier by dusk, blanketing the roofs and muffling every sound. The little Swedish village looked peaceful, but Captain Mercer could feel the tension tightening in his chest like a fist. From the crack in the barn wall, he watched the forest line. "They'll be here before nightfall," he said quietly. Cole stood beside him, coat still buttoned to the throat, briefcase never leaving his hand. "The Germans won't risk a firefight on Swedish soil," he said, half convincing himself. "They'll come quietly. A few men, a few shadows." Mercer gave a grim chuckle. "You don't know the kind of men who chase ghosts across borders." Dugan had found an old hunting rifle leaning by the barn door. He was cleaning it now, humming low under his breath. "Feels like the old days, Skipper," he said, "except the stakes are a hell of a lot higher." The barn door creaked open. The gray-bearded villager stepped inside. "You must go," he whispered urgently. "Soldiers, I see them." Forest Road. They asked questions. Mercer rose. "How many?" "5 trucks. Maybe more." Cole's face paled. "That's not a search party," he murmured. "That's a retrieval team." The villager looked at him sharply. "You bring trouble. My people cannot fight soldiers." Mercer laid a hand on the man's shoulder. "You've done more than enough. We'll draw them away." Dugan checked his weapon. "You got a plan, Skipper?" Mercer looked out at the darkening snow, his breath fogging the cold glass. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We give them a trail to follow, but not the one they want." Far off, the low growl of engines broke the stillness. The wolves had arrived. The village lights flickered in the falling snow as the first German trucks rolled in. Their engines muted, headlights dimmed. Soldiers in white winter smocks jumped down, rifles slung tight. They moved with purpose, not hesitation. These were not regular infantry. These were Brandenburger commandos, trained for stealth and sabotage. From the shadowed barn, Mercer watched through a crack in the boards. "They're spreading out," he whispered, checking every house. Cole crouched beside him, tension carved into his face. "If they find us, the Swedes will be caught in the crossfire." Mercer nodded. "That's why they won't." Outside, Dugan and two crewmen crept through the backfield, their boots sinking deep in the snow. They carried lanterns wrapped in cloth, leaving faint flickers of light in the trees. False signals meant to draw the Germans away. Dugan set one down on a fence post, another near the riverbank, like breadcrumbs leading back toward the woods. Within minutes, a German officer barked an order. Half the commandos peeled off, following the faint lights into the dark. The bait had worked. Mercer exhaled slowly. "Good man, Dugan," he murmured. "Let's move." They slipped out the back of the barn. Mercer, Cole, and two of the wounded. The gray-bearded villager handed Mercer a small map and whispered, "Old mine. 2 kilometers east. Empty now. Safe, maybe." Mercer gripped his hand firmly. "We owe you one, friend." But as they trudged into the snow, the wind carried with it the sharp crack of gunfire. 1, then 2, then 3 shots in the distance. Dugan's diversion had been found. Cole froze. "That was your man." Mercer stared into the darkness. "Yeah," he said softly, "and he just bought us a little more time." The wind howled through the pines as Mercer and the survivors pushed east, guided only by the faint outline of the hills ahead. Snow fell in thick sheets now, swallowing every sound. Cole stumbled more than once, the briefcase dragging at his arm like a curse. "Keep moving," Mercer urged, his voice hoarse. "We stop, we freeze." An hour later, they reached a jagged slope, a scar of rock and snow cutting through the forest. Just above them, hidden behind overgrown firs, yawned a black hole in the mountain, the mine. Its timbers were old, warped with age, and the entrance was half buried in snow. Mercer climbed up first, brushing frost from a faded wooden sign. The letters were Swedish, but the meaning was clear enough, closed since 1928. He turned back to Cole. "Your new headquarters, Mr. Secret Service." Cole managed a weak smile. "Better than a prison camp." Inside, the mine smelled of cold iron and damp earth. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness, revealing rusted carts, tools left to rot, and walls slick with frost. They found a dry corner, laid out blankets, and lit a small lantern. For the first time in hours, silence felt safe. Mercer sat down, rubbing his temples. "We'll stay till morning. If the Swedes find us first, maybe we can talk our way out. If the Germans do," Cole finished the sentence for him, "then we destroy the briefcase. At all costs." Mercer looked at him steadily. "What's really in it, Cole? Not just papers. You don't chase papers with killers." Cole hesitated, his breath catching. "Blueprints. For a bomb the Germans are building. A new kind of weapon. It could end cities, not battles." Mercer stared at the lantern flame, the truth sinking deep. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. The hunt wasn't over. The mine hummed with its own small life. The settling of old beams, the whisper of distant ice shifting. Mercer lay awake, listening to the sound in the snow above them. A pattern, not random. A soft scraping, then a pause, then the faint crunch of boots on packed trail. He knew that rhythm. It was the sound of a hunt closing in. Cole sat with the chain briefcase between his knees, fingers running over the leather strap as if it were a talisman. "They'll probe the village tomorrow," he said quietly. "Then the mine. They'll be thorough." His voice was brittle. "They've already lost men for this. They won't stop until they have what they want." Outside, a twig snapped very close. Dugan froze, breath held, then eased his rifle into position. The lantern threw their shadows long and jagged against the tunnel wall. Mercer rose and peered into the dim, the beam cutting through dust motes like a saber. The scrape came again, nearer, with a new undertone, the muted bark of a German order, low and urgent. "Get ready," Mercer whispered. "We don't run. We don't surrender. We make them pay for every inch." They fashioned crude traps from rusted rail spikes and old mining rope, hidden beneath a thin dusting of coal and snow hauled inside. Harris, teeth still chattering from ice water, wrapped his wound with trembling skill, then grinned like a man who'd been reborn. "Never thought I'd be back in a mine for anything but pay," he joked weakly. The laugh that followed was small, but it eased something fragile between them. Footsteps multiplied above. Voices in German threaded through the tunnel rock like cold wind. A lamp glowed at the mouth of the shaft. Silhouettes moved, figures checking, scanning. The villagers had done their best, hiding signs of life, but a broken fence and the old plane's wreck made deception hard. Mercer put a hand on Cole's shoulder. "When they come in, you make sure that Case never leaves this place," he said. "No matter what." Cole's reply was a steady, final nod. The scrape stopped directly overhead. Silence pressed in, a heavy, waiting silence. Then, from the darkness beyond the lanterns, a shadow dropped into the mine mouth and landed on the wooden planking like a cat. A German voice hissed, asking a question in guttural Swedish-tinged German. "Anyone here?" Mercer swallowed. Night had a long, cold taste, so did fate. The intruder's flashlight cut through the dark like a blade, sweeping across the frozen walls of the mine. Mercer crouched behind a collapsed support beam, finger resting lightly on the trigger of his rifle. Every heartbeat was thunder in his ears. The German commando took a step inside, boots crunching softly on the frost. He was cautious, too cautious. Trained, the kind of man who'd seen enough death to know where it hides. He raised his weapon, listening. Dugan moved first. One quick burst from the shadows. Crack, crack, crack. The German dropped without a sound, the flashlight rolling away, beams spinning across the tunnel like a restless ghost. "Now they know," Cole whispered. "Yeah," Mercer said grimly. "And they'll come heavy." Outside, voices erupted, shouts, commands, the click of safeties released. Within seconds, the mine's mouth exploded in gunfire. Bullets sparked against stone, sending echoes deep into the earth. The men ducked low as dust and splinters rained down. "Two flanking left," Dugan shouted. "They're trying to box us in." Mercer grabbed a rusted shovel handle and slammed it into an old lantern, plunging their section into darkness. "Let them come," he said, steady and cold. The Germans moved in, three shadows, quick and silent. The first tripped the line Dugan had rigged, a rope holding back a load of old mine debris. The avalanche came down with a roar, burying one man, sending the others diving for cover. The fight turned brutal and close. Mercer fired once, then again. The tunnel filled with gun smoke and echo. When silence finally returned, three bodies lay still in the snow-dusted dirt. Cole stared at them, face pale. How many more will they send? Mercer reloaded slowly, eyes hard, enough to make sure we don't see daylight. Far above, a flare arced into the night sky, red and bright, marking their position for the kill. The crimson flare hung in the sky like a bloody moon, its glow bleeding through the snowstorm. Every man in the mine knew what it meant. They'd been found, marked for death. Mercer's gut twisted. "They'll bring mortars," he said quietly. "Maybe grenades. They'll smoke us out." Cole looked up, eyes wide in the dim light. "But we're on Swedish soil. They can't." "They already did," Mercer snapped. The minute they crossed that border, the rules went out the window. Outside, the faint thump of truck doors and shouted commands carried through the storm. Then came the mechanical clatter of weapons being set up. Heavy, deliberate. Dugan glanced toward the entrance. "Sounds like they're digging in, Skipper. We're box tight." Mercer ran a hand over his face, mind racing. The mine went deep, too deep to dig out fast, but maybe deep enough to hide. Cole, he said, how far does this tunnel go? Cole blinked. I don't know. The villager said it's been sealed for years. Then maybe that's exactly what we need. Mercer picked up the lantern and started deeper into the mine, its flickering light bouncing off wet stone. The air grew colder, the walls narrower. After 50 yards, the tunnel split. One passage collapsed entirely. The other descended at a sharp angle, vanishing into black. A faint draft brushed Mercer's cheek, cold but moving. There's air, he said. Means there's another exit somewhere. Behind them, the first mortar shell whistled through the storm and exploded outside the mine's entrance. The blast shook dust from the ceiling. Dugan flinched. That was close. Mercer turned back toward his men, eyes fierce. Grab what you can carry. We're going deeper. Cole hesitated. And if they follow? Mercer chambered around, his jaw set. Then we make sure they regret every damn step. Above them, the red flare flickered out, swallowed by snow and silence. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The air turned damp, heavy with the smell of old coal and rust. Mercer led the way with the lantern, its faint glow pushing back the dark just enough to show the rotted tracks beneath their boots. Every sound seemed to echo forever. Every breath, every footstep, every whispered word. Behind him, Harris limped badly, one arm draped over Dugan's shoulder. Feels like walking straight into hell, he muttered. Then keep walking, Mercer said. Because hell's behind us. A distant explosion rumbled through the tunnels, another mortar shell. Dust rained from the ceiling, and somewhere behind them, timbers creaked like old bones. The Germans were getting closer. Cole stumbled on a loose plank, but caught himself, clutching the briefcase tight. If we die here, he said quietly, the information dies too. Maybe that's better. Mercer shot him a look. Don't start that talk. Not after what we've been through. Cole's voice hardened. You don't understand what's inside this case, Captain. If the Germans finish what's written here, London, New York, maybe the world, it all burns. Mercer didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the stakes. The tunnel widened suddenly into a large chamber, an old loading bay where miners once worked. A rusted cart still sat on the rails, half full of coal. Mercer swept the light around. We'll hold here for a bit. Rest, check ammo. Dugan nodded, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. How deep do you think we are? Deep enough they'll have to earn it, Mercer said. But even as he spoke, a faint clinking echoed down the shaft, metallic, steady, deliberate. It was the sound of boots striking steel rails. Cole's face drained of color. They're in the tunnel. Mercer blew out the lantern. Then we wait in the dark. Darkness swallowed them whole. The kind of black that presses against your skin, thick and absolute. The men crouched low, weapons ready, every sense tuned to the faintest sound. From the tunnel behind came the unmistakable rhythm of boots on steel. 3, maybe 4 men, moving carefully, their breath echoing faintly off the stone. The Germans had entered the mine. Mercer's voice was barely a whisper. Hold your fire until you see their lights. A tense minute crawled by. Then, a flicker. A narrow beam cut through the dark, swinging slowly across the chamber. Another followed. The shadows of helmets and rifles moved like ghosts on the far wall. Mercer raised his hand, signaling Dugan and Harris to fan out. The old miner's cart sat between them, loaded with cold dust and rusted metal, perfect for an improvised trap. Mercer found a half-empty can of fuel they'd carried from the wreck and poured it over the pile. When I shoot, he murmured, light it up. The first German stepped into the open, flashlight beam trembling slightly. He scanned the chamber, saw nothing, and motioned his comrades forward. Mercer squeezed the trigger. One clean shot. The lead soldier dropped instantly. Now, Dugan struck the match and tossed it into the cart. The fire roared to life, a sudden explosion of orange and blue light that turned the mine into a furnace. The Germans panicked, shouting, firing wildly. Bullets sparked off stone, but Mercer's men had already moved, ducking behind beams and shadows. The firefight was short, savage, echoing like thunder through the tunnels. When it ended, the only sound left was the hiss of burning coal. Cole crouched beside the bodies, shaken. "You just lit up the whole mountain," he said. Mercer reloaded calmly. "Good," he said. "Now they know where to look." Cole frowned. "That's good." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Yeah, because while they're chasing ghosts down here," he pointed to a dark shaft leading upward, "we'll be going the other way." The air shimmered with heat from the burning cart as Mercer led the survivors toward the narrow shaft he'd spotted, a jagged wound climbing steeply upward into the rock. The smoke made every breath sting. Behind them, the fire cracked and spat, throwing monstrous shadows that danced along the tunnel walls. "This way," Mercer barked, coughing. He shoved the lantern into Dugan's hand and started the climb. The shaft was rough, barely wide enough for one man at a time, with old supports that groaned under their weight. Every creak sounded like a warning from the mountain itself. Harris gritted his teeth and pulled himself up one rung at a time, his wounded legs shaking. "Skipper, if this thing gives way." "Then we climb faster," Mercer growled. Below them, faint shouts echoed, German voices, angry, disoriented. They found the dead men and the fire. It wouldn't take them long to realize their prey had gone up. Cole climbed behind Mercer, his chain-bound briefcase clanking softly against the rock. "This is madness," he said between gasps. "They'll follow. They always follow." Mercer didn't look back. "Then let's make sure we're somewhere they can't." After what felt like hours, Mercer pulled himself up onto a narrow ledge. The tunnel widened into a small cave, open on one side. A pale light spilled through a break in the stone, daylight. Freedom. He crawled toward it, heart pounding. The opening led to a snow-covered slope overlooking a vast valley. Pine forests stretched to the horizon, and somewhere far below, a river shimmered under the weak afternoon sun. Dugan helped the others up, panting. "We made it," he said. "By God, we made it." But Mercer's eyes narrowed. Down in the valley, black dots moved against the white trucks. German trucks. "They're circling ahead," Mercer muttered. "We're not out yet." Cole rested against the rock, exhausted. "They know where we're going before we do," he said bitterly. Mercer looked out over the frozen wilderness, jaw set. "Then we changed the rules." The wind hit them like a wall as they stepped out of the cave. It howled through the valley with the kind of cold that burned. Snow swirled around them, thick and merciless, a blizzard rolling down from the north. Mercer squinted into the storm. The German trucks were gone from sight now, swallowed by white. "This storm's our cover," he said. "If we move fast, we can lose them for good." Dugan tightened his scarf and grinned through chattering teeth. Hell of a way to celebrate being alive. They started down the slope, half sliding, half stumbling. Every step was treacherous. The snowdrifts were knee-deep, sometimes waist-high. Harris fell twice, the second time not getting up until Mercer hauled him to his feet. Cole trudged beside them, face pale from exhaustion. The chain around his wrist was rimed with ice. "We can't last long in this," he warned. "Without shelter, we'll freeze before nightfall." Mercer nodded grimly. "Then we find something before the storm finds us." Hours passed like minutes. The world shrank to wind, snow, and pain. Once, through the swirling white, Dugan swore he saw movement, dark shapes gliding along the ridge above them. "Skipper," he said quietly, "we're not alone." Mercer stopped, scanning the ridge. The storm blurred everything, but then, yes, a faint flicker. A flashlight. The Germans were still on their trail, pushing through the same storm, relentless as wolves. "Keep moving," Mercer ordered. "They'll freeze before we do." By twilight, they found the remains of an old cabin buried beneath the drifts. The roof sagged, and the door hung open, but it was shelter. Inside, they built a small fire from broken beams. The warmth was a miracle. Cole sat close to the flames, staring into them. "You know," he said softly, "the Germans called this kind of storm der Weiss Tod, the White Death." Mercer looked out through the cracked window, snow. "Howling past. Then let's hope it takes them before it takes us." The cabin groaned in the wind like an old ship at sea. Snow forced its way through the cracks, settling on the floor in small drifts. The fire popped and hissed, barely enough to warm the men huddled around it. Mercer sat near the doorway, rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the white blur outside. "No sentries," he said quietly. "No one moves alone. We don't know how close they are." Harris was wrapped in a blanket, skin pale, shivering violently. Frostbite had set into his fingers. Dugan tended the fire, feeding it carefully with strips of timber from a broken chair. Cole sat apart, the briefcase resting on his lap. His expression had changed. Not fear, not fatigue, but something deeper. Guilt. "You thinking about what's inside that case?" Mercer asked. Cole looked up slowly. "Every second," he said. "What we stole from them. It's monstrous, Captain. Equations, drawings. Power beyond bombs. If they finish it first, there won't be a Berlin left to bomb." Mercer stared into the fire. "And if we don't get a home?" Cole didn't answer. The question hung there, heavy as the snow outside. Then, faintly, they heard it, a distant rumble. At first, Mercer thought it was thunder, but the rhythm was too steady. Engines. Dugan glanced at the window. "You've got to be kidding me. They're still out there." Mercer stood and blew out the lantern. The firelight dimmed, leaving only embers. "They're tracking our smoke," he said. "Smart bastards." Cole gripped the briefcase. "What do we do?" Mercer checked his rifle, calm but cold. "We hold. They'll come in waves, slow and careful. When they do, we make every round count." Outside, the storm screamed like a living thing. And through it came faint voices, German commands closer than before. The White Death had found them both. The wind howled through the cracks of the cabin, rattling the loose shutters like bones. Outside, the storm had swallowed the world. The only light came from the dying fire, a dull orange glow that flickered against the men's drawn faces. Mercer crouched by the door, peering through a narrow gap in the wood. The snow was so thick he could barely see more than 10 yards, but sometimes, just sometimes, he caught a shadow moving. A shape that wasn't wind or drifting snow. "They're out there," he whispered. "Waiting." Dugan checked his rifle, jaw set. "So are we." Cole sat against the far wall, still gripping the briefcase, knuckles white. "They won't rush in blind," he said softly. "They'll wait for the storm to ease. Use the silence against us." Mercer nodded. "Then we make silence our friend first." He moved quietly through the cabin, dousing the fire until only smoke remained. The darkness pressed in, thick and absolute. The men held their breath, listening. For a moment, it seemed as if even the wind had stopped, until a single crunch broke the stillness. A boot step, right outside. Dugan raised his rifle, breath shaking. Another step followed, then a whisper of German, too soft to make out, but close. So close. The door latch twitched. Mercer motioned to hold. The latch lifted again, slowly. Mercer waited until he saw the barrel of a rifle slip through the crack. Then he kicked the door wide open, slamming it against the soldier's arm. A burst of gunfire shattered the night. 2 Germans dropped in the snow, one still screaming, the other already still. More coming. Dugan yelled, firing through the doorway. Muzzle flashes lit the storm like lightning. Mercer ducked and returned fire, each shot controlled, deliberate. The smell of gunpowder filled the tiny cabin, sharp and choking. Outside, more shadows advanced through the snow. Relentless, silent, like ghosts in white. Cole pressed his back to the wall, clutching the case to his chest. "Captain," he whispered, "if they take it." "They won't," Mercer said, eyes hard. "Not while any of us are breathing." The cabin was a war zone. Muzzle flashes tore holes through the dark, and the snow outside churned red beneath the flickering light. Bullets splintered the doorframe, shredded the walls, and sent clouds of sawdust into the air. Dugan yelled over the chaos. "We're running dry, Skipper." He tossed Mercer his last magazine. Half full, dented, and slick with blood from a graze on his arm. Mercer slammed it into his rifle. "Make every shot count," he barked. The Germans pressed harder now, firing from behind the cover of snowdrifts and trees. One of them hurled a grenade. It landed just inside the doorway. "Down!" Mercer shouted. He dove, pulling Harris with him as the explosion rocked the cabin. The blast blew a hole through the wall, filling the air with smoke and flying splinters. For a few seconds, there was only ringing silence. Then, movement. Figures in white surged through the smoke, bayonets gleaming. Mercer rose from behind the fallen beam and fired point blank, dropping two before one lunged at him. The German slammed into him hard, driving him back. They grappled, slipping on the blood-slick floor. Mercer caught the man's wrist, twisted, a sharp crack, and shoved him aside. Dugan fought near the doorway, swinging his rifle like a club when his ammo ran out. Harris, pale and weak, used his last strength to drag a German down and stab him with his own knife. It was brutal, desperate, and close. When it was finally over, the storm outside had softened to a whisper. The cabin, once their refuge, was now a ruin of shattered timber and frozen blood. Mercer stood among the wreckage, chest heaving, hands trembling from exhaustion. Dugan sat against the wall, eyes hollow. "We can't hold another wave," he muttered. "We're done, Skipper." Mercer didn't answer right away. He looked at Cole, who still clutched the briefcase, and then at the mountains beyond the broken wall. The storm was clearing, and with it came the pale light of dawn. "We're not done," Mercer said finally. His voice was quiet but steady. "We're just out of time." The first light of dawn crept through the shattered cabin walls, pale and cold. It painted the snow a ghostly blue and revealed what the night had taken. 4 dead Germans, 2 wounded, and one of Mercer's own men lying still beneath a broken beam. Harris. Dugan knelt beside him, silent, the frost clinging to his lashes. "He never even saw the sun come up," he whispered. Mercer's jaw tightened. "He saw enough," he said quietly. "He bought us the time we needed." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a silence almost too heavy to bear. Smoke from the wrecked fire curled lazily upward, marking their position like a beacon. It wouldn't be long before the Germans regrouped. Cole stood by the door, his face drawn, lips cracked from cold. "Captain, if we try to run now, they'll see us on the open slope. We won't make it 100 yards. Mercer looked toward the valley. The sun was barely a pale smear through the clouds, but it was rising, and with it came a faint glint far below. A river, still flowing under a thin sheet of ice. "Water," Mercer said. "It'll hide our tracks." Dugan frowned. "You want us to go into that river?" "Sir, it'll freeze us solid." Mercer turned, eyes hard but calm. "If we stay here, we'll be dead men before the hour's out. I'll take cold over bullets." He strapped his rifle to his back and pulled Harris's tags from his neck, sliding them into his pocket. "We move now," he said. They stepped out into the snow, leaving the ruins behind. The world was silent, too silent. No birds, no engines, just the whisper of wind and the crunch of boots. Cole followed close, the briefcase chained to his wrist, his breath fogging in the air. "If we get to that river," he said, voice shaking, "and somehow survive, what then?" Mercer didn't look back. "Then we keep walking until we find someone who'll listen." Behind them, far on the ridge, a single flare rose, bright red against the morning sky. The hunt wasn't over. The river was half ice, half mist, a black, twisting vein cutting through the white valley. The current moved sluggishly beneath the frozen crust, gurgling like some buried beast. Mercer stared at it for a long moment, gauging its depth, its speed, its promise of both escape and death. Dugan kicked at the edge with his boot. The ice cracked, spiderwebbing across the surface. "You really think this is the way out, Skipper?" Mercer nodded once. "They'll follow our tracks in the snow, but the river washes everything clean. It's the only shot we've got." Cole stood a few paces back, shivering violently, clutching the briefcase like it was part of him. "We'll freeze to death in there," he said, his voice tight with fear. "The current's too strong." Mercer turned to him, his breath misting in the cold air. "You said what's in that case could end the war. Then dying to protect it is the job, not the choice." Dugan exhaled through chattering teeth, gave a grim grin, and said, "Well, hell, I've always hated choices anyway." He stepped forward and swung his rifle, but down hard. The ice shattered, and a rush of dark water surged up, biting at their boots. One by one, they waded in. The shock was immediate. The kind of cold that cuts through bone, steals your breath, and makes your heart forget how to beat. Mercer led the way, teeth clenched, forcing each step as the current dragged at his legs. Cole stumbled once, the chain between his wrist and the briefcase catching on a jagged edge of ice. Mercer grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up before the river could claim him. "Keep moving," he shouted over the roar. Behind them, distant voices carried through the valley, German commands. The hunters had reached the slope. "Go, go," Mercer barked. They followed the river downstream, the current, sweeping them into a narrow gorge. The walls rose steep and high, sheltering them from sight and sunlight. Their breath came in ragged gasps, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. When they finally crawled onto the far bank, Mercer collapsed onto the snow, gasping. Dugan lay beside him, eyes wide, lips blue. "We did it," he said weakly. Mercer looked up at the empty ridge above. No movement, no flares. For now, they were ghosts. But ghosts don't rest long in war. They lay on the riverbank for several minutes, too weak to move, their soaked uniforms steaming faintly in the thin morning light. The current roared past, carrying broken shards of ice down toward the forested valley. Mercer forced himself upright first. His body shook uncontrollably, fingers stiff and white. "Get up," he said hoarsely. "If we stay still, we're done." Dugan groaned, rolling to his knees. "Feels like I made a glass, Skipper. One wrong move, and I'll shatter." "Then move careful," Mercer said. Cole was last to rise, barely able to speak through his chattering teeth. "WEC can't. Keep this pace. I can't feel in my hands." Mercer looked at him, at the chain biting into his wrist, at the briefcase crusted with frost. "You hold that case," he said, voice low but fierce. "That's your warmth now. That's your purpose." Cole met his eyes for a long second, then nodded. They started down the frozen trail that wound along the gorge. The snow was thinner here, packed by wind and the shadow of the cliffs. Every step echoed softly, swallowed by the vast silence. After an hour, they found a cluster of pine trees leaning over the bank. Beneath them, a hollow half filled with dry needles, shelter of a kind. Mercer signaled for a halt. Dugan collapsed under a tree, breathing hard. "You think they bought it? That the river finished us off?" Mercer didn't answer right away. He crouched and studied the ground. Snow still fell faintly, but not enough to cover tracks forever. Somewhere, upstream, a faint echo. Maybe rocks falling, maybe voices. He couldn't tell. "They'll keep looking," he said finally. "They have orders. And the kind of men they sent, they don't quit." Cole sat beside him, clutching the briefcase close. "Then what's next, Captain?" Mercer looked toward the forest stretching ahead. Endless, quiet, and cruel. "We find a village," he said. "Swedes will help us, or at least hide us. And if they don't," Dugan asked. Mercer adjusted his rifle strap and started walking. "Then we make our own way home." Far above, on the opposite ridge, a flash of sunlight glinted off something metallic, binoculars. The hunt was still on. By midday, the forest had closed around them like a cathedral of ice. The pines rose high and black, their branches heavy with snow. The air was still, muffled, every sound dampened by the cold. Even their footsteps seemed to vanish before they hit the ground. Mercer led the way, rifle at the ready, eyes scanning the tree line. Every so often, he caught a flicker of movement, not close, not clear, but enough to make his gut tighten. "They're in the woods," he said quietly. Dugan adjusted his pack. "Could be deer." Mercer shook his head. "Deer don't move in formation." Cole trudged behind them, exhaustion etched into his face. "Then we're trapped. We can't outrun them in this terrain." Mercer stopped suddenly and crouched beside a broken branch. Fresh snow had been disturbed. Faint prints, narrow boots, disciplined spacing. He brushed the powder away, revealing something else beneath it, a cigarette but still warm. "They're close," he whispered. Dugan swallowed hard. "Then what's the plan, Skipper?" Mercer's eyes swept the trees ahead. The slope dipped into a small hollow, thick with brush and fallen trunks. "We make a stand," he said. "Ambush, quick and clean. Hit them before they know where we are." They moved fast, setting up positions among the trees. Mercer took the high ground. Dugan covered the left flank, and Cole hid behind a snowbank, the briefcase chained to his arm and a pistol shaking in his frozen hand. Minutes passed. The woods held its breath. Then voices. German, faint but distinct. A small squad, maybe 6 men, moving cautiously through the pines. Mercer's finger tightened on the trigger. The first man appeared through the mist, rifle raised, scanning the trees. Behind him came another, then another. Mercer exhaled slowly. Now he whispered. Gunfire tore through the forest. The echo bounced between the trees, disorienting the Germans. 2 dropped instantly. The rest dove for cover, shouting in confusion. Dugan fired again, a clean headshot through the mist. But then, a burst from the right flank. Dugan cried out and fell, clutching his shoulder. "Dugan!" Mercer shouted, rolling behind a log as bullets chewed through the bark. The Germans were regrouping, fast, trained, furious. Mercer gritted his teeth and fired again. The forest erupted in chaos. The forest exploded with gunfire. Echoes crashed between the trees, each shot ricocheting through the frozen stillness like thunder. Snow burst into the air with every bullet strike, drifting down in soft white clouds that almost looked peaceful. Almost. Mercer lay prone behind a fallen trunk, firing in short, precise bursts. Each pull of the trigger felt heavier than the last. The Germans had spread out, moving like hunters, their white camouflage blending perfectly with the snow. Dugan's status. Mercer shouted. From somewhere to his left came a strained reply. Still breathing, Skipper, but barely. They got me through the arm. Stay low and keep your head, Sergeant. Mercer ordered, eyes never leaving the treeline. A German voice called out, calm, confident, in accented English. Americans, you cannot escape. Surrender, and you live. Mercer gave a humorless grin. He's lying, Cole crouched behind a snowbank, the briefcase chained to his wrist glinting, dully in the cold light. His hand shook as he held the pistol, breath coming fast and shallow. Captain, we can't win this fight. Mercer turned his head just enough to meet Cole's eyes. Then we make it count. Another burst from the Germans cut through the air, shredding branches above them. Mercer waited for the rhythm. 3 shots, pause, 2 shots, reload, then moved. He rolled from cover, fired twice, dropped one of the Germans cleanly, then dove behind another tree. 4 left. He shouted. The snow at his feet erupted, a grenade. Mercer threw himself back as the explosion lit the woods. The blast threw snow and bark into the air, knocking the wind from his lungs. When he came to, his ears were ringing. Smoke drifted through the trees. He blinked and saw Cole on his knees, one hand over his chest, blood seeping through his coat. The briefcase still chained to him. No. Mercer scrambled to him, dragging him behind a log as gunfire raged. Cole coughed, eyes glassy. Captain, take it, don't let them. He tried to lift the briefcase, but his strength was gone. Mercer grasped his hand, squeezing hard. You hold on, damn it. Cole gave a faint smile. You were right, Captain, dying's not the choice. His eyes fluttered once, then stilled. Mercer clenched his jaw, the sound of approaching boots growing louder through the pines. The enemy was closing in. Mercer dragged the briefcase from Cole's lifeless hand, snapping the chain with the butt of his rifle. His heart pounded like artillery fire in his chest. The Germans were closing in, 5, maybe more, voices shouting and clipped commands, boots crunching over snow. He glanced toward Dugan, who was slumped against a pine, bleeding badly but still conscious. Skipper, Dugan rasped, we're out of time. Mercer nodded grimly. He reached into his coat, pulled out a single remaining grenade, and set it beside the briefcase. Then we give them a show they'll never forget. He tore a strip from his sleeve, wrapped it around the grenade's pin, and tied the other end to the case's handle. A trap, a soldier's goodbye. Dugan gave a faint grin. You've got one hell of a sense of humor, Captain. Mercer loaded his last magazine. That's what keeps me alive. The first German appeared through the smoke and snow, silent, cautious, scanning the carnage. Mercer's shot took him in the chest before he even saw it coming. Another moved to flank, but Dugan, half blind with pain, still managed to fire a burst that dropped him where he stood. But there were too many. The air filled with the hiss of bullets, the thud of impacts, the shouts of men who refused to die quietly. Mercer crawled toward Dugan, grabbed his collar, and dragged him back toward the ridge. "We've got one more card to play," he said. Dugan coughed blood, his grin fading. "You're not going to make it, Skipper." Mercer didn't answer. He reached the briefcase, clicked it shut, and took one last look at the bodies. Cole's still form, the scattered Germans, the trees split by gunfire. "You're right," he said softly, "but maybe the message will." He yanked Dugan's dog tags free and pressed them into his hand. "If you live, Sergeant, you get those home." Then, through the rising wind and gun smoke, he heard the guttural German order, "Fewer." Bullets rained down. Mercer rose, firing until his rifle clicked empty, the sound lost in the chaos. He threw the weapon aside, grabbed the briefcase, and hurled it as far as his frozen arms would allow. It hit the snow with a dull thud. The pin snapped free. The explosion tore the forest apart. The explosion rolled through the forest like thunder from a forgotten god. Snow and fire lifted into the air, and the pines bent under the shockwave. When the echo finally faded, all that remained was silence. A terrible, endless silence. Mercer lay half buried in the snow, ears ringing, body numb. He didn't know how long he'd been there. Minutes, maybe hours. When he tried to move, pain lanced through his ribs, but he managed to push himself upright. Smoke still curled upward from what had been the center of the fight. Now just a blackened crater littered with broken steel and torn branches. Of the Germans, there was no sign. The snow had covered everything in white again, erasing them, erasing nearly all trace of what had happened. A few feet away, Dugan lay on his side, barely breathing. His eyes fluttered open as Mercer crawled to him. "You did it, Skipper," Dugan whispered. "They're gone." Mercer gave a faint smile. "Not all of them, but enough." Dugan coughed weakly, his voice fading. "Guess that's our 26th mission, huh?" Mercer gripped his hand. "No, Sergeant," he said quietly. "It's our last one." Dugan's fingers went still. Mercer sat there for a long time, the snow falling gently around him, covering the scars of battle. When the wind shifted, he looked up, and there, high above the valley, sunlight broke through the clouds. For the first time in days, he saw clear blue sky. In that light, for just a heartbeat, he imagined he heard it, the deep, steady thrum of engines. Not real ones, but the ghostly echo of the Lucky Lady, his old B-17, flying high and proud through that endless sky. The sound of a promise of home. He rose slowly, the cold biting through him, and looked east. Somewhere beyond those mountains lay Sweden, safety, and the hope that someone would learn what they had died to protect. Mercer took one step, then another, vanishing into the snow. The wind carried only a whisper behind him. Lucky Lady, clear for landing.